Wow, I cannot believe what just happened inside the courthouse. This isn't even about Durk. This one's actually about me. There's been a very controversial post that has been going around. Everybody's very upset that I basically did a tweet about that post that Didi had reshared. All right, the prosecution had worded it in a way that it sounded like Didi had posted it, and I posted that on Twitter. I came back and Didi's lawyer spent a whole hour breaking down in meticulous detail how this was a repost. It wasn't an original post. Didi hadn't typed the post. He had reposted it into a group chat. It was that post that said, @Quando Rondo, we're your pipe at gang. He had reposted it into a chat along with his own comment, basically saying he looking crazy. Like he basically, it was he playing crazy, right? So as soon as I got out of court after hearing Didi's lawyer argue that point very, very well, maybe a little bit too well, maybe the point had already come home before, you know, he talked about it for a much longer time than he needed to talk about it. And I felt like he might have brought more attention to the fact that that was a bit of an unsavory thing to repost. I posted that. As soon as I got out, I said Didi's lawyer just clapped back. But for some reason, it seems like the people at the courthouse, the people that have been following this case, and Durk's team specifically, they're not reading everything. They're over here reading the transcripts, but they're not reading all of my tweets. So everybody was upset about the tweet that I posted when I got out the courtroom the first time. Nobody had talked about the second tweet where I said that Didi's lawyer just clapped back. And I got confronted by Lil Durk's PR woman. She screamed in my face outside the courtroom, delete the tweet. I said, what do you mean? Like, what about Didi's lawyer talking for an hour about, you know, basically making the point? I said, I came out the courtroom, I was given the impression that Didi had posted it. Didi's lawyer went back into the courtroom. He made it very clear. He made a very long, extended, maybe an overextended argument about why that wasn't the case. He got his point home. He got his point further than home, all right? He got the point so far home that he might have, you know, left it on screen a little bit too long and made things look a little bit bad. Durk's PR person said, I'm not talking about that. We're not talking about that. So they're just ignoring the facts. They're pressing me over stuff that's like incomplete information. I'm just coming out the courtroom, giving you guys the updates as soon as I possibly can. Yes, sometimes the prosecution are going to say things that aren't true. Sometimes the defense are going to say things that aren't true. Brian Steele said several things that are absolutely false when he was doing cross-examination just now. He referred to King Von as K. Von Bennett numerous times. That's not his name. Is anyone going to call out Brian Steele for getting that wrong? No, of course they're not, right? He made a bunch of other mistakes. He said that Quando Rondo had crowned and anointed Lil Tim as King Tim after the killing of King Von. No, he didn't. It was a random other rapper from Savannah, Georgia that put that out after King Von died. And then he also said numerous times that King Von was murdered. Was not a murder. The prosecution made it very clear it was a self-defense killing. Yes, he was charged with murder, but it was not proven as a murder. So no one's going to talk about Brian Steele literally getting up in the courtroom and lying. People want to get onto me for making a tweet and then basically updating you when I heard from Didi's lawyer. It's insane. All right, so a couple of really interesting things just came out of the courtroom, and it kind of relates to some of these alleged gang connections that have been brought up. So they kind of teased some of the things that it sounds like maybe OTF Jam or, you know, some of the other cooperating witnesses are going to say, and they basically hinted, we might be hearing some of that testimony today, but we basically heard an update that apparently one of those folks is going to call Didi the leader of Tay-Town, not a shooter. There was someone that kind of inferred that he was a shooter, and basically they're saying no, they're going to claim that he is a leader of the Tay-Town set. Apparently another participating witness that is cooperating with the government is basically going to say that Durk was mad at members of O Block for not protecting King Von at the time of the shooting, okay, which is interesting because that kind of is going to contradict these claims that apparently, you know, King Von had said to Vonnie before he passed away after getting shot, why didn't you protect me? Why'd you let him shoot me like that? Now, what's crazy is apparently OTF Jam overheard a conversation with Durk, members of O Block, Didi, and Booney Mo, basically saying that apparently Durk had actually paid for members of O Block to have an Airbnb in Atlanta, and he was mad that they didn't slide for Von when they were at that Airbnb in Atlanta. It's crazy. So another thing that was interesting, obviously we're hearing all this stuff about Durk said don't book no flights in my name, and they're trying to say, oh, you know, Durk didn't know what was going on, like them flights ain't have nothing to do with him, there wasn't more details. Now this wasn't connected to the murder of Lil Pab, but apparently there is text between Durk and that same guy who was ordering his flights, Jason, back in December the 3rd, 2020 after Von died, where Durk was saying they need flights blood. He's saying who? He's saying Didi. He's saying Booney Mo. He's saying Christopher Wright. So another thing that came up was that they basically kind of went back and forth and showed some of the stuff that King Von was posting when he was still alive. Now, Von actually posted an Instagram of himself and Lil Durk when he was alive, and it had a pretty crazy caption. It said, if Smirk want an N-word dead, then an N-word dead on O, you know how I'm coming. If you got it, I got it. If I got it, you gave it to me. Durk's one of my top 5 people alive. I love you. Now look, that don't prove anything. King Von made that before he was even dead, but it just kind of like builds up this close relationship between, you know, Von and Durk, and the get back and the slide in and the footage of Von getting killed, which was obviously shown previously. Now, we then moved on. This detective gave a lot of information, but we then moved on to cross-examination. And look, I am a little bit upset. I'm a little bit salty that Brian Steele said a few things that I know not to be true from my research. But that said, I'll keep it real. Brian Steele did an amazing job, and he really, really grilled this detective. It kind of gives a bit of a stale taste in your mouth when it's like, damn, he really grilling them, but then he's saying a few things that aren't right. He's messing a few names up. He got King Von's name wrong numerous times. He called him K. Von Bennett numerous times, and it's just kind of like, bro, like, come on, man. But I don't think the judge knew. I don't think the judge worked it out. I don't think he cared. We're going to do a full update on everything that was going on with Brian Steele right after this video. I'll let you know what was going on. He did actually do a very good job, but he did make a few mistakes. There was a crazy moment in court today when they finally played Lil Durk's unreleased Red Man music video. They didn't play the whole video, and they didn't even play the song, but they played the intro with sound. And I'm not gonna lie, it was looking like a great video. It was looking like a big budget video. They had an actor that looked just like Quando Rondo. He was dressed in the outfit that Lil Tim was wearing when King Von got killed. I believe the video was made by infamous video maker Jerry Production, who's produced a lot of videos for Durk as well as Von. I'm not gonna lie, the video looked fire. It looked big budget, but obviously what was bad was it showed Lil Durk sliding in the back of a van with what looked like a Mac, but like, you know, it's like, sort of like a mini machine gun type gun, pulling up on this Quando Rondo lookalike, shooting him dead in the street, shooting him on the ground, standing over him, pulling off his mask and revealing that it was Durk that did it. Now, I'm not going to lie, the video looked fire. I wish I could have watched the whole thing, but obviously it wasn't a great look for the jury. And what made it even worse is it had all this dramatic kind of movie style score music in the background. And if I'm real with you, it really built up a vibe. It really built up this kind of terrifying murder, true crime vibe in the video that I'm sure Durk is probably regretting from when he made that video. But it was very interesting because Brian Steele kind of clapped back. He said that this video is art. He pointed out that Quando Rondo had also made a video where they depicted Durk getting shot and killed. It was interesting because they showed a screenshot of the Lil Durk lookalike in the video. That was shown by the prosecution. But weirdly, they didn't show the music video for that. So weirdly, the prosecution didn't actually bring up the video now because I kind of know a little bit too much about this case. I know that it's the song Soul Reaper, right? I got it for you there. I just looked it up and double checked. But it's the song Soul Reaper where they had a Lil Durk lookalike, and they didn't even bring this up. I'm surprised they didn't bring this up, but Lil Pab, the actual victim, is in that video killing Lil Durk. They didn't bring that up. I'm surprised they didn't. But regardless of that, that was shown as part of when they showed the Quando Rondo interview with Angela Yee in the back of the Rolls Royce. And they pointed out he's in a Rolls Royce. Look at the headrest. They didn't say why, but they're obviously going to introduce the evidence later on that Durk had lyrics where he's talking about that Rolls better be bulletproof. We're going to shoot at the stars. But anyway, Brian Steele kind of brought forward a bunch of stuff to basically say, look, you didn't question Quando Rondo's art when he had a lookalike that, you know, a Durk lookalike that was killed in the Soul Reaper video. You're judging Durk's art. He said Jerry Production's a very accomplished video maker. You know, Durk didn't necessarily have anything to do with this video. They said, you know, the video wasn't released. He didn't really land on any of those points, but I think what he was trying to infer was that Durk didn't know. You know, everybody knows that Durk was having these problems about, you know, what had happened with Von. There's a scene in the video where Durk's looking at his phone and you kind of see all these news articles about Von popping up. But I think what Brian Steele was trying to infer that, like, someone else, maybe Jerry Production, had come up with the concept of the video based on everything that was going on. And perhaps, maybe Durk wasn't happy with the way he was depicted in that video and decided not to release it. But unfortunately, they got that video from someone in his team's phone, and they were able to show that intro where he kills the Quando lookalike in the courtroom. And just the spooky music they added to it, I would say definitely made it worse. But Brian Steele did a great job of arguing against it, and I'm about to tell you everything about Brian Steele in another video. Okay, so there was some crazy evidence that was shared today. I'm going to be very careful about what I say. I don't want Durk's team to scream at me outside the courtroom telling me to delete everything like they did today. But look, I'm just going to be careful about what I say. They brought up some of these Duty Low messages. There were messages back and forth with Duty Low. Now, I want to just be very careful what I say. It seemed like they were inferring that Durk was kind of going back and forth in these messages, but I don't know if that can be 100% proven. They were saying that there were a lot of messages that were deleted. Durk's efforts to apparently delete his messages very regularly seemed like he was actually having some success with deleting these messages, okay? It seemed to suggest that Duty Low had gone back and forth with somebody that was saved as Slime Life Shorty. Now, I know Slime Life Shorty is someone in Atlanta who was brought up in, you know, the Young Thug situation, and there was even kind of a, you know, a whole thing where, you know, Young Thug had dropped that song, talk about Slime Life Shorty, you know, I hope you put down your 40, but it seemed like that was what Duty had Durk saved as, but I can't be 100% sure. But the context of the conversations seemed to have Duty kind of going back and forth with Durk, They basically seemingly had a bit of a celebration. So what was interesting, right, was apparently Duty Low had done a reaction, like a laughing reaction, to a message that said no, which was right after Quando Rondo was screaming on the street no over Lil Pab's body. Now, they had basically recovered that reaction, but what they didn't have was the original messages. So we don't know for sure, but it seemed like it would have been a reaction to Durk's message saying no, but we don't have that. And then basically we saw this back and forth with Duty Low, and basically before anyone says Duty Low's telling or he's cooperating or anything like that, the feds basically said that they had numerous warrants for numerous iCloud accounts with Duty Low. It was hot for Duty Low, and the feds were onto him, and clearly they I don't know how they did it. I don't know if he even know they got it, but they got all of his iCloud info from his phone. But basically, they went back and forth. Duty Low had apparently said to this person, it was saved in his phone, keep your head on slime, in the pain, I'm with you for life. This was the person said to Duty Low, keep your head on slime, I'm in this pain, I'm with you for life, I'm drilling about this shit. Duty Low said, I love you, slime. They said, I love you back, slat. It's up about this shit. After that, this person was messaging Duty Low saying, where you at? I'm at the crib. Duty Low saying, call me. And then that person that saved the Slime Life shorty sends Duty Low Quando Rondo's number. And he says, Quando's number. They said it's one of his phones. And then the next day, there's a message back and forth where that person that saved the Slime Life shorty, that it seemed like it could have been Durk, but not 100% confirmed at this stage. They basically said, I've got an N-word from Savannah who got dropped. Obviously, Savannah, Georgia is where Quando Rondo is from, drops his locations, and Durk says, this is him, you want his number? Duty Low says, yeah, and he sends the number. Now, obviously, it was made very clear nothing was necessarily slid about. They never tried to do a drive-by on Lil Tim or anything like that in Savannah, but obviously these messages were going back and forth, and it's not a great look. But look, I'll let you know more when I have more context. All right, so we just heard a couple of really interesting updates from the court about how Durk and them were treating OTF Jam. Now, obviously, they worked out that he was apparently getting ready to snitch. We've heard more about these messages. You know, they're basically saying Jam getting ready to snitch, clear as day. They were cutting him off. There was apparently a conversation we heard about previously where, you know, Durk and them had taken him into a bathroom stall at a music video shoot and said to him, you making it hot, you catching bodies, you getting the feds on us, you need to chill out, you might need to leave town. And then there were a whole bunch of back and forth messages that we saw where Jam had apparently said, like, hey, why is everyone scared of me? Ever since that day, nobody want to be around me. What's going on? Well, now we heard even more details from the conversation, and it seemed like Durk was kind of cooking Jam. This was a little bit more context they added. He said Jam just ready to snitch blood, clear as day on Lil Mo, and then he basically said, wait, what'd he say? He basically said something along the lines of like, blood not even down here, but he F with Lil Tay, he different. They said he pulling a GD move. So Durk acting like all the GDs are the ones who be telling. Obviously he's got a big gang war with the GDs, but they're not allowed to talk about that today. But then Durk went on to say he a real goofy. Now, DD then sent an image into the group chat, the OTF group chat, that was a screenshot of a chat that he'd had with Jam. Or basically he had showed the screenshot of it and he said, Jam said, what's up? Is it fuck him? Let us know what it is. Jam want to talk to you. Stand on lawyer so he can be there on the 20th. So it sounded like they weren't sure if Jam was already telling. Jam was asking for a lawyer, asking if he was going to stand on it, saying Jam want to talk to you, all this kind of stuff. And then the prosecution revealed that at this point, apparently during this conversation, or basically on August the 24th, 2023, Jam was already in custody in Chicago. And then there was another reply, Durk saying about Jam. They said he going to tell soon. And then Didi replied he thinks he can break us down on Mom for real. And then apparently Didi had said in description of Jam, he a Alpo ass dude, obviously in reference to the infamous snitch over on the East Coast. And then somebody in the chat that was called Loyal basically said, beware of everyone, not just Jam. And then after that, there was some more back and forth where that person went on to say at this point, for real, weird ass people. And then after that, apparently Booney said that the feds had been going to the jails, talking to everybody that came in. They'd basically been hearing rumors that inside the jails, inside the prisons in Chicago, anyone that had anything to do with Durk, the cops were sitting them down and trying to talk to them. They're saying they're trying to sit everyone down and ask for the ABC. And that's when Durk said that line. He said, as long as we don't break, they can tell them whatever. So, yeah, I'm not going to lie. That was a pretty crazy exchange. So we finally saw Brian Steele cross-examine this kind of big detective, and look, Brian Steele put on a very, very good display. He grilled him about all the times that, you know, these interviews were conducted. Loads of interviews were conducted. They weren't recorded. And look, I'll be real. Brian Steele told a couple of lies, made a couple of mistakes. He said that Quando Rondo was the one that crowned Lil Tim as King Tim after King Von died. That's not true. That was another rapper from Savannah. Nothing to do with Quando Rondo. He was an associate. He was an affiliate. But as far as I'm aware, immediately after King Von died, Quando Rondo wasn't the one saying free Lil Tim, hold up, wait, it's King Tim. He also referred to King Von as K-Von Bennett numerous times, which I thought was just like, you know, not really having the best grasp of the case. But at the end of the day, that's not really making a huge difference. And he also incorrectly pointed out that, you know, he said, oh, there was a argument about a celebrity boxing match. You know, Durk was saying that he could box Quando Rondo for $20 million. That's not what was said. He said, I could box you for $20 million. This is my opinion. I think he was talking about Youngboy. I think he was sending a voice note to Youngboy, and he said, your homie Quando can die though. So how would he be talking about he can have a $20 million boxing match with Quando, but then also saying your homie Quando can die though? In my opinion, I think he was talking about Youngboy, and I think he misrepresented that evidence too, since we're all talking about people getting things wrong. Brian Steele made the point that you can actually download an app that kind of like automatically deletes all your messages, you know, within 30 days. They're saying, look, Durk having his message deletion app on his phone, like if he was using other means to delete his messages, that doesn't necessarily prove guilt. He talked about OTF Jam having the Rats to Riches print on his pants. Weirdly, the detective said, oh, he thought it said Rags to Riches, which was different from what we heard from the other detective. But then Brian Steele basically said, well, look, rats are sometimes falsely identified, right? Brian Steele made a pretty smart move when he was asked about this message where Durk had apparently said wait for the get back in response to stuff that he had been sent of people from Quando's side clowning him. And he basically made the point, he said, well, did you know that there was a song called Get Back? When he was inferring basically that like when Durk said wait for the get back, he could have been referring to wait for me to drop my song that was called Get Back. I'm gonna lie, I thought that was genius. That was a really smart move. But obviously the crux of it was basically just attacking all of these interviews. Brian Steele said the agent attended 41 meetings with Jam that they were aware of. Apparently they did 10 meetings with Vonnie. The agent that was on the stand was there for 6 of those. And apparently the other witness, Jones, was interviewed 3 times when they were present. And they basically just kept going on saying, why didn't you do recordings? Dee Dee's lawyer took over. Their whole thing was basically like, why weren't all of these recorded? And I'm not going to lie, the detective did a good job of basically saying, well, we're not required to record all of them. It depends on the budget, depends on the schedule, depends on if we can get the equipment. But I think Brian Steele did an impeccable job of kind of, you know, putting some reasonable doubt forward and sort of pre-trashing these witnesses' credibility. Got to give respect to Brian Steele. Even though he got a few things wrong, he was doing a great job, and you can definitely see why he's a multi-million-dollar lawyer in there. So respect to Brian Steele, and I'm excited to hear him keep going.